Though it was officially spring according to the calendar, it was still a cold day. Having lost my place at home, I was aimlessly killing time at the park, filled with melancholy. I was approached by an elderly gentleman in a very neat suit. "Hello, Lisa. How do you know my name?" Before I could even begin to appreciate his charming smile, I was more concerned about how he knew my name. "I'm Brown. I've come to repay a favor." Seeing Mr. Brown, the polite elderly gentleman, I was greatly surprised. "Mr. Brown?" "Yes. I'm the homeless man you helped." It was hard to believe, and I felt stunned by the unexpected turn of events. "Good deeds come back to you, bringing fortune. I've come to prove that." Mr. Brown offered me, who had been downcast, a significant proposal. I, Lisa, have been living with my son and his wife since my husband Stephen passed away a few years ago. If we got along well, there would be no problem, but unfortunately, that's not the case. My son, Nicky, can best be described as full of energy in the kindest terms, and his wife, Annabelle, as feisty just as the same. Frankly, there's no need to mince words. Nicky was a frivolous person who always tried to play along, and Annabelle was selfish and lazy. Stephen was very strict in his lifetime, always keeping a close eye on Nicky and his wife. And if they stepped out of line even slightly, he did not hesitate to scold them severely. Perhaps because of that, Nicky and his wife were relatively meek while Stephen was alive, and we had few problems living together. However, after his death, Nicky and his wife started to get carried away, showing their true colors, so to speak. Not that Nicky isn't my child, and criticizing him feels like criticizing myself, but I wonder if I might have made some mistakes in raising him. Still, Nicky is the better of the two. Annabelle is the problem. Even before the mourning period for Stephen ended, she became visibly more arrogant and lazy. How so? While I wouldn't say it's all Annabelle's fault, the issue was she did no housework at all. She, as I knew, was 66 years old, not as physically capable as I might seem, and yet, she dumped all the housework on me. "You should just stick to doing the housework." It's not that I hate doing housework, but having it significantly cut into my personal time was something I couldn't accept. That personal time, simply put, is dedicated to my hobby of crafting various things. My creations might be common, but they include things like scarves, items that are part of daily life. To get back to the point, Annabelle indeed did no housework at all, leaving it all to me. Even I, usually so understanding, found myself unable to accept, or rather felt it was downright unreasonable, and spoke to Nicky about it. "Could you talk to her?" It's not that I hate doing housework, nor do I think it's solely her duty, but it seems a bit much, don't you think? According to Annabelle, what else could Mom do but housework, right? It was as if he wasn't listening at all, always siding with the stronger argument, just a superficial person trying to please, and I quickly had to give up hope. Even conceding as much as I could and accepting the housework, not having time for myself was the real issue. For example, one day, after finishing up with the chores, I was yelled at by Annabelle while I was knitting, which is my hobby. "What are you playing at, Lisa? If you have time for that, you should go shopping or something." I couldn't understand why I was being yelled at like this, and even if there was a reason, it seemed completely unjustified. After all, Annabelle, who spends her days in leisure, was the last person I wanted to hear it from. If such days continued, even I couldn't stay quiet forever, or rather, I didn't intend to be that much of a pushover. "Annabelle? Don't you think you should do some of the housework yourself?" "What? Are you saying that's my duty? Your values are so outdated it's laughable." Annabelle's right. "You know, Mom, that's called being a boomer." "That's not what I meant. I was just speaking common sense. Boomer common sense is nonsense to everyone else. I won't tolerate backtalk. Exactly. Even if I reluctantly overlooked her arrogance, Nikki, who only sided with what was advantageous to him, was just disappointing. But even if my protests were completely in vain, being called a boomer was truly disheartening, and more than giving up, it was purely infuriating. The self-centeredness of Nikki and his wife accelerated after my protests, and Annabelle even began to say things like this. Boomer Lisa, who can only do housework. Is dinner ready yet? Being constantly harassed, I couldn't even force a smile anymore. In fact, it seemed rare to be able to smile under such treatment. While it was bad enough not to be able to laugh, I increasingly felt like I had no place there. Unable to bear her cold stares, I started escaping to the park as soon as I finished the bare minimum of daily chores. The season was about to turn to winter, and though it was indeed cold outside, it was still better than enduring Annabelle's harsh words. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to do at the park, and I could only sit on a bench until it was time to prepare dinner, looking up at the sky. Despite how unbearable Nikki and his wife were, I still carried a mobile phone for emergencies, as it would be troublesome if they couldn't contact me, but I didn't know how to kill time with it like the younger generation. What I could do was, for my own comfort, look at photos of the handcrafts I had made, which had accumulated in quite a number, and modestly praise my own efforts. This park is quite spacious and gets fairly busy on holidays, but on weekdays during the day, it's almost deserted. However, I did notice a few cardboard houses, suggesting some homeless people called this place home. From the bench I happened to sit on, I could see one of the cardboard houses, but I knew I had no right to scold the homeless person living there, even though I was in a similar situation. One time, I saw a homeless man emerge from that cardboard house within my field of vision. He seemed to be in his 70s, with disheveled hair mixed with gray and an unshaven beard that had grown freely, wearing shabby clothes. It's wrong to expect anything from a homeless person, but strangely, his eyes didn't seem clouded, rather, they appeared to possess a firm will. I believe that the state of one's heart reflects in their eyes. By that measure, it seemed that this homeless man had some kind of purpose, and that alone made him seem favorable to me. However, that didn't mean I wanted to get close to him, and in reality, there was no connection between this homeless man and me. That day ended like that, but on another day, when staring up at the sky became too boring, I decided to bring my knitting from home and knit outside. The weather was capriciously mild and warm for early winter, making it comfortable to work outside without my hands becoming stiff. Moreover, working felt more productive without Annabelle watching. That homeless man was in my field of vision again, which was fine, but he was intently watching me knit. It wasn't a gaze filled with disdain, rather, it seemed curious. I knew it was rude to say, but I couldn't help wondering why a male homeless person would be interested in knitting, although being watched didn't bother or hinder me, so I decided not to mind. When I got used to working outside, that homeless man approached me. Hello. My name is Brown. What? Hello. I'm Lisa. He introduced himself politely, and I found myself drawn into responding to this homeless man, who called himself Brown. Up close, Mr. Brown, despite his unkempt appearance, had a sparkle in his eyes that was rare to find, and I didn't feel any disgust being near him. I've seen you around lately. With the weather like this, wouldn't it be better to stay indoors? Mr. Brown's voice was very gentle, not hoarse from drinking or smelling of cigarettes, suggesting he probably didn't smoke. Above all, his voice was kind, which made me lower my guard a bit. It seems knitting is your hobby. Don't your hands get cold, making it hard to move them? Though, if you find it more productive outside, that's a different story. His tone was calm and sincere, making me wonder how such a person could be homeless. Unfortunately, personal character and financial circumstances don't always align, so there was no use dwelling on that. However, when he asked why I was there, I found myself at a loss. I could answer, but it wasn't something I felt should be broadcasted, nor was it appropriate to complain about personal grievances or speak ill of others to someone I had just met.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to pry into your affairs. If you think it's trivial chatter, feel free to laugh it off or ignore me.
The homeless man was as gentlemanly as his eyes suggested, making me feel it would be incredibly rude not to answer Mr. Brown's question. I've lost my place at home. Surprisingly candid, I shared my reason with Mr. Brown.
Is there some trouble within the family?
Yes, my daughter-in-law is terribly overbearing.
Not only does she push all the housework onto me without doing anything herself, but she also calls me a boomer.
At that moment, I wasn't sure what expression I wore, but Mr. Brown looked troubled.
That's a terrible situation. Obviously, I don't know the details about your daughter-in-law, but that's no way to treat a parent, even if by marriage.
Right. It was a strange feeling, sharing my pent-up frustrations with a man I had just met, making my heart feel a bit lighter. Then, very audibly, a sound of hunger rumbled from Mr. Brown, who looked somewhat embarrassed.
I apologize. Hunger is an unbeatable foe. I have a favor to ask, if you'd be willing to hear me out?
And what would that be?
Could you spare $1? I don't want to seem patronizing after listening to your story, but if you could see it as an act of kindness.
If he had asked for $100, I might have refused, but $1 seemed insignificant, and after listening to my story, it felt wrong not to respond to someone in need.
Is $1 enough?
It's plenty. I took out $1 from my wallet and gave it to Mr. Brown. This helps a lot. Now I can survive another day. Seeing his genuine relief made me realize the daily hardships of being homeless, making me feel like I had done something very good.
Excuse me, but I must go and find some food now.
After thanking me politely, Mr. Brown hurried off towards a nearby budget grocery store. There, even with just $1, he could buy a pastry, at least quieting the pangs of hunger for a while. Of course, I knew that wasn't enough for a real meal, but I didn't see any reason to go out of my way to care for Mr. Brown beyond that. Every day I ran into Mr. Brown, I would share my daily grievances about Annabelle, and in return, I gave him $1, a routine that continued. I didn't mind, especially since he seemed to genuinely empathize with my situation. It appeared that he would use the $1 to buy food from that budget grocery store each time. Mr. Brown, aren't you hungry? I thought the food you can get for $1 would be quite limited. One day, I made a sandwich for him and brought it to the park.
Is this for me?
Yes, unless it's a bother.
Not at all. This is very helpful.
I was genuinely pleased to see Mr. Brown so happy.
Then I'll eat. Thank you.
He opened the lunchbox politely and ate the sandwich with elegance yet with evident enjoyment, which, while expected, was pleasantly surprising.
Your kindness is deeply appreciated. Thank you truly.
His words of thanks were sincere, without any hint of insincerity, and I wasn't cynical enough to doubt his gratitude. On another day, a very cold wind was blowing, and although I had dressed warmly for the park, I couldn't help but worry about Mr. Brown.
Hello, Lisa. It's quite chilly today, isn't it?
As expected, it seemed Mr. Brown didn't have the luxury to dress warmly, looking very cold.
It's not much, but maybe this will help a bit.
I had anticipated this and brought a scarf I had knitted from home.
What's this?
I knitted it. It's for you. Seeing Mr. Brown moved by the gesture, I felt confident that I had done something good.
This texture, the careful finish, it could fetch a good price. It's a waste to keep such talent as merely a hobby.
It was odd that Mr. Brown would praise aspects most people wouldn't notice, but I didn't think much of it at the time.
Have you been doing this hobby for a long time?
Yes.
I thought so. Your experience shows. Do you have anything that shows your past work, although it might be unlikely given the place?
Although it was a strange question from Mr. Brown, I thought I should show him if asked, so I showed him photos of my past projects stored on my mobile phone.
Incredible, truly incredible. I am impressed. Thank you. The warmth of handmade items can never be matched by ready-made products. Lisa, you are remarkable.
Watching Mr. Brown quietly close his eyes, savoring the warmth as if cherishing it, made me feel as if I had accumulated good deeds.
However, I must return it, as much as it's a generous offer. Lisa, you already possess skills that could be monetized, yet you haven't had the opportunity to utilize them. What are people thinking?
Mr. Brown seemed upset, but the idea of earning money from my skills was foreign to me, making his anger seem somewhat misplaced.
That aside, I'll give you the usual $1.
Thank you. Instead of heading to the grocery store, Mr. Brown went to a phone booth with the $1 I gave him. Over the next few days, I met Mr. Brown daily, giving him $1 each time, which he always took to the phone booth. I didn't know whom he was calling, nor did I have the right to know. One day, Mr. Brown was unexpectedly absent from the park at our usual time. Feeling a slight loneliness, I thought it might be difficult for a day-to-day homeless person to stay in one place.
Lisa, you're going to the park again, aren't you? That's better for me. Being around a boomer contaminates my thinking.
A month had passed, and after enduring harassment from Annabelle, I found myself heading to the park again. Feeling an unexpected loneliness without someone to talk to, and it was natural that Mr. Brown's face came to mind.
Hello, Lisa.
Yes? Looking up at the sound of the voice, I saw a distinguished elderly gentleman in a fine suit, with a gentle and lovely smile standing before me. It was beyond me why this elderly gentleman knew my name, given we seemingly had no connection. As I stood there perplexed, he greeted me with a familiarity I felt I had seen somewhere before and slowly handed me a business card.
I am deeply indebted to you for the other day.
Mr. Brown? I couldn't believe it at first glance at the business card, but if I imagined the Mr. Brown in my memory without his neglected beard and with his hair tidied up, this gentleman fit the image, especially the sparkle in his eyes. Looking at the business card again, it listed him as the chairman of a nationally renowned clothing manufacturer, a name familiar to anyone and with stores across the country.
Why was the chairman of a major corporation living as a homeless person? Yes. I recently handed the presidency over to my son, gaining some free time for myself, and it was related to a memory of mine.
A memory, you say?
There was a time when I too lived a hand-to-mouth existence. It was on a cold day like this when a homeless person appeared and gave me their scarf.
Then, Mr. Brown pulled out the scarf I had given him earlier.
It's a long time ago, so that benefactor is likely no longer in this world. However, I wanted to understand their spirit. How could someone with nothing to their name share such kindness with others? I understood that, albeit briefly.
Mr. Brown continued, his eyes narrowing as if he had discovered a significant truth.
If one receives kindness, they should nurture it and eventually pass it on. It's not something a frivolous person can do. It's a strength gained only through living through the lowest of lows and surviving. It's about sharpening one's sense of empathy and having the vision to see the truth.
His story was a bit abstract, and my confusion must have shown because he added,
"Sorry for the philosophical talk. Simply put, Lisa, your kindness made me realize something important. Thank you, truly."
"I understand that, but what exactly are you here for?" My question might have seemed rude, but Mr. Brown responded with a gentle smile. "I've come to repay you. You showed kindness to a dirty homeless man and have a sure talent in crafts. I have a proposition for you." I didn't immediately grasp the meaning of Mr. Brown's words. "May I have a moment of your time?" "Yes." Mr. Brown sat down next to me.
The proposition for repaying you is none other than to entrust you with one of our company's new specialty handcraft stores we plan to launch.
He presented a contract, but the sudden offer was hard to comprehend immediately.
I used the $1 you gave me to discuss with my secretary over the phone. Our company values people first and foremost. We've deemed you worthy of managing a store.
While I was flattered by the praise, the sudden proposition was overwhelming.
I will never forget the warmth of the scarf you gave me. I want to spread that kindness further. I've heard multiple times about the terrible treatment you've received from your daughter-in-law. This could be a small step towards your independence.
But I'm not the sort to own a shop. I know nothing about running a business.
Lisa, modesty is a virtue, but too much of it isn't praiseworthy. My judgment isn't without insight. You have the potential. I assure you. We will support you fully in managing the business. Won't you please accept?
Refusing seemed like it would be terribly unkind to Mr. Brown, and truthfully, I wasn't without a desire to become independent from Nicky and his wife. After some thought, I answered, "I understand. I would be delighted to accept."
Thank you.
And so, I was entrusted with a small craft store under Mr. Brown's company. The store was cozy, which meant I could easily manage every corner of it, an ideal situation for me. In the time that followed, I packed my belongings at home without Nicky and his wife noticing. Once I was done, I left a text as a sort of farewell note without informing them of my new address and quietly moved out. The employees at the store I managed treated me with respect and care, making the place very comfortable. I enjoyed my freedom so much that I had no intention of returning to Nicky and his wife. The condominium I moved into, on Mr. Brown's advice, had strict security with a resident security guard, in case Nicky and his wife tried to visit.
Mom, help! Without you, we're struggling with the housework. The two of us can't handle everything.
I received texts like this almost daily, full of entitlement, but I consistently refused, declaring my parental duties over. Later on, driven by curiosity, I passed by Nicky and his wife's house. Even from outside, I could tell their living conditions had deteriorated, indicated by the unmistakable smell. Nicky continued to send me texts detailing their dire situation, but I ignored them all. Annabelle, failing to understand the consequences of her actions, began harassing Nicky instead. It seemed her nature required her to oppress someone, making me feel even more relieved to have cut ties. Though I don't know if naturally is the right word, their marriage was fraught with constant arguments, leading to Nicky's demotion at work and a significant pay cut. Despite continuous texts from Nicky showing no sign of reflection, I focused on living my life, considering it his responsibility. Mr. Brown occasionally visited my store to check on things and introduce customers, maintaining a good relationship. This way, I finally found happiness.